The laughter echoed through the great hall of the Galactic Council. It was not a kind laughter. It was the sound of powerful beings mocking something they considered. Beneath them, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the speaking platform. Her hands steady on the wooden podium that humans had brought from Earth. It was a tradition, she had once explained. Humans liked to touch something real when they spoke from the heart. Today, her heart was breaking. She had just finished presenting humanity's proposal for equal voting rights. After 200 years of membership in the galactic community, humans were still classified as a developing species, could speak at council meetings, but their votes counted for half of what other species received. Their colonies were always given the worst locations. Their innovations were constantly credited to their advisors from older species. Counselor Thrixa of the Valkyrie laughed the loudest. His blue scales shimmered under the lights as he wiped tears of amusement from his 4 eyes. The Valkyrie were ancient and proud. They had been exploring space when humans were still living in caves. The children want to sit at the adult table, Thrixa said, and the chamber erupted in more laughter. How precious. How absolutely precious. Lena did not react. She had heard these words before. Every human diplomat had heard them. Children, primitives, the pets of the galaxy. Amusing little creatures who tried so hard. She looked around the chamber at the representatives of 47 species. Some were laughing. Some were looking away with embarrassment. A few, like the small delegation from the Rathani and the Moss people of Verdant 7, watched her with sad eyes. They knew what it felt like to be dismissed. Alina reached up and removed her translation device from her ear. The small machine had converted her words into 1,000 languages for 200 years. She placed it gently on the podium. The laughter began to fade. Confusion replaced amusement. Without a word, Alina turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were the only sound in the suddenly silent chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, Thrixa called out, his voice uncertain now. "Where are you going?" "We have not dismissed you." Alina did not turn around. She did not speak. She simply walked through the great doors and let them close behind her, across the galaxy. In embassies and trade stations and colonial outposts, every human diplomat did the same thing within the hour. They removed their translation devices. They packed their personal belongings. They walked away without anger, without tears, without a single word of complaint. The message from Earth arrived 6 hours later. It was broadcast on every channel, in every language, delivered by the calm voice of the United Earth government. Earth thanks the Galactic Council for its clarity. Humanity withdraws from all interstellar agreements effective immediately. We wish you well. That was all. No threats. No demands. No dramatic declarations of revenge or promises of return. Just a simple goodbye and a wish for wellness. Thrixa laughed when he heard it. "A tantrum," he announced to the council. "The humans are having a tantrum. They will come crawling back within a week. 2 weeks at most. They need us far more than we need them." The other counselors nodded in agreement. Of course, the humans would return. What choice did they have? They were a young species with limited technology. They depended on galactic trade for medicine, for fuel, for protection from the dangers of deep space. But 1 week passed. The humans did not return. Earth's borders went dark. The jump gates that connected human space to the rest of the galaxy were shut down. Communication buoys went offline one by one, like stars winking out of existence. Trade ships that approached human territory were politely turned away by automated systems. "We appreciate your visit. Humanity is currently unavailable. Please return to your point of origin. Safe travels." 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Then a month. The council sent official messages, demanding explanation. The messages went unanswered. They sent unofficial messages offering to discuss the situation. These too went unanswered. They sent threats, warnings about economic consequences and political isolation. The silence from Earth was complete. 3 months after Ambassador Vasquez walked out of the council chamber, Counselor Thrixa stood before his colleagues with a very different expression on his face. The amusement was gone. The pride was cracking. "There have been some minor disruptions," he admitted. Nothing significant. But perhaps we should send a delegation to Earth, simply to check on the situation, to ensure that humans are managing without us, the council agreed. A small ship was dispatched, carrying diplomats from 5 species. They expected to find a struggling civilization, desperate for help, ready to accept any terms for re-entry into the galactic community. What they found was silence. Their ship was allowed to land on Earth. Guided by automated systems to a reception hall outside the old capital of Geneva, the hall was empty. Clean and well-maintained, but empty. No welcoming committee. No desperate officials. Just a single screen on the wall displaying a message in 100 languages. It made it clear we were not wanted. We have respected your wishes. Humanity thanks you for your visit. Please enjoy refreshments before your departure. A table nearby held food and water. Nothing else. The diplomats waited for 3 days. No one came. They sent messages requesting meetings. No one responded. They wandered the empty halls, finding only more screens. More polite automated messages. More silence. When they returned to the council, their report sent ripples of unease through the chamber. The humans were not struggling. The humans were not desperate. The humans had simply moved on. This is fine, Thrixa announced, though his voice wavered slightly. We do not need them. We have survived for millions of years without humanity. We will continue to survive. But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Small problems. Minor inconveniences. Systems that were not working quite as well as before. No one connected the dots yet. No one realized the truth. The galaxy had never noticed how much humanity had been holding together. But they were about to find out. The galaxy freaks out when humanity breaks off all diplomacy part. 2. The first collapse happened on Velkar Prime. The proud homeworld of Counselor Thrixa and his ancient species. For 3,000 years, the Velkari had operated the largest mining consortium in the galaxy. Their massive machines dug deep into asteroids and dead planets, extracting the rare minerals that powered starships and medical equipment and communication systems. Everyone depended on Velkari mining. Everyone paid their prices without question. But 6 months after humanity went silent, the machines began to fail. It started with small errors, calibration problems, filters that clogged too quickly, cooling systems that ran too hot. The Velkari engineers worked day and night to fix the issues. But for every problem they solved, 2 more appeared. Finally, the chief engineer of the largest mining station made a confession that shook the Velkari leadership to its core. We do not know how to maintain these systems, she admitted, her scales pale with shame. We have not known for centuries. What do you mean? Demanded Thrixa. These are Velkari machines. Velkari technology. The engineer looked at the floor. The core technology is Velkari, but the improvements, the modifications, the systems that made everything work better and faster and safer, those were designed by humans. The truth came out slowly, painfully. For 200 years, human engineers had worked alongside the Velkari. They had been given the lowest positions, the most boring tasks. The jobs that prestigious Velkari engineers considered, beneath them, maintenance, calibration, quality control, but humans were curious creatures. They could not simply do a job. They had to understand it. They had to improve it. They had to make it better, quietly, without asking for credit or recognition. Human engineers had redesigned almost every major system in the Velkari mining operation. They had fixed problems the Velkari did not even know existed. They had increased efficiency by 300% while reducing accidents by 90%. And they had never asked for anything except the chance to learn. Now they were gone. And they had taken their knowledge with them, the Velkari. Mining Consortium lost 40% of its capacity within 3 months. Prices across the galaxy tripled. Shortages appeared in markets that had never known scarcity. But mining was just the beginning. On Rethon, the great medical academies faced their own crisis. The Riani were known throughout the galaxy as healers. Their doctors were the most respected, their hospitals the most advanced, their treatments the most effective. But the Rithani had a secret shame. There were certain diseases they refused to treat. Illnesses that affected the lowest classes of other species. Conditions that were messy, undignified, or simply too much trouble. Humans had treated those diseases. Human doctors had. Volunteered for the quarantine zones where plagues ran wild. Human nurses had cleaned wounds that made other species turn away in disgust. Human researchers had developed treatments for conditions that the prestigious Rithani academies considered unworthy of study. Now those humans were gone, and the diseases were spreading. A young Rithani child named Mira was brought to the central hospital on Rithan with a fever that would not break. Her doctor, a respected healer named Torvash, ran every test he could think of. He consulted every database, every expert, every ancient text. But the disease that was killing Mira had been cured decades ago by a human researcher named Dr. Sarah Chen. The treatment was simple and effective. But Dr. Chen was back on Earth, and she had taken her formulas with her. "Can we not recreate it?" Mira's mother begged. "Can we not figure out how she did it?" Torvash could not meet her eyes. "The humans always just gave it to us," he whispered. "We never asked how. We never bothered to learn."
Ow.
Mira died 3 days later. She was not the last. Across the galaxy, the cracks spread wider. Trade routes fell into chaos. Because human navigators had memorized the safe paths through unstable space. Their brains could calculate adjustments faster than any computer. Without them, ships were lost. Deliveries were delayed. Entire colonies faced starvation. Communication networks failed because human technicians had been maintaining the ancient relay stations that no other species wanted to visit. The stations were in dangerous locations, boring to operate, and paid almost nothing. Humans had done the work anyway, because someone had to. Diplomatic negotiations collapsed because human translators had been smoothing over cultural misunderstandings for centuries. They had a gift for finding common ground, for hearing what species meant instead of what they said. Without them, old enemies remembered why they hated each other. The Galactic Council held emergency meeting after emergency meeting. Counselors shouted at each other, blamed each other, demanded that someone fix the problems they had never known existed. Thrixa secretly dispatched another ship to Earth. This time, he sent his own daughter, a young diplomat named Vishra, who had always been kind to humans. Perhaps they would speak to her. The ship was allowed to land. Vishra walked through empty halls, past silent gardens, into reception rooms where automated systems offered food and water and nothing else. She stayed for a week. She left messages every day, begging for any response. On the final day, a screen lit up with a single sentence. "You made it clear we were not needed. We have respected your wishes." Vishra returned home with empty hands and red eyes. She would not tell her father what she had felt in those empty halls. The silence had been worse than any angry words. The galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. Humanity had not been a burden. Humanity had not been a charity case. Humanity had been the quiet hands that kept everything running, the patient hearts that cared when no one else would. And now, those hands were still. Those hearts were closed. On a small station near the edge of explored space, the Zenith Collective called an emergency assembly. The Zenith were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. They had seen everything, or so they had believed. The eldest of the Zenith, a being so ancient that it remembered when the Velkari were young, spoke words that had never been spoken in 10,000 years of galactic history. May have made a mistake. The galaxy had laughed at humanity now. The galaxy was learning what it had lost. The galaxy freaks out when humanity breaks off all diplomacy. Part 3. 8 months after humanity went silent, the galaxy began to remember. It started with small things. A Velkari merchant found an old recording of a human engineer explaining how to fix a broken water filter. He watched it 17 times, taking notes, trying to learn what he had never bothered to understand before. At the end of the recording, the human looked directly at the camera and smiled. "If you have any questions, Just ask, she said. I am always happy to help. The merchant sat alone in his shop and wept. On Rethan, Dr. Torvash could not sleep. Every night, he saw the face of young Mira, the child he could not save. He began searching through old records, looking for every interaction the Rithani medical community had ever had with human doctors. What he found made him sick with shame. There were thousands of records. Thousands of times when human doctors had offered help, shared research, volunteered for dangerous assignments. And in almost every record, the Rithani response was the same: polite dismissal, gentle condescension, a pat on the head for the primitive species that tried so hard. Thank you for your enthusiasm, one Rithani administrator had written to Dr. Sarah Chen. The same doctor whose treatment could have saved Mira, but I am sure our own researchers can handle this matter. Perhaps you should focus on something more suited to human capabilities. Dr. Chen had not argued. She had not complained. She had simply continued her work in the quarantine zones, saving lives that the Rithani considered worthless, developing treatments that no one would ever credit her for. Torvash shared his findings with his colleagues. Some were angry, defensive, unwilling to accept blame. But others grew quiet. They began their own searches. They found their own memories of human kindness that had been dismissed or ignored. A senior healer remembered a human nurse who had stayed by a dying patient's side for 3 days, singing soft songs in a language no translator could understand. I thought she was wasting time, the healer admitted. I told her to leave, that there was nothing more to be done. She looked at me with such sadness. She said that no one should die alone. Then she went back to singing. A young researcher found records of a human scientist who had spent 20 years developing a vaccine for a disease that only affected the poorest species in the galaxy. No one asked him to do it, she said in wonder. No one paid him. He just thought it was important. The memories spread across the galaxy like ripples in water. On a trade station in neutral space, a Valkyrie child dropped her favorite toy, a small mechanical bird that her grandmother had given her. The bird's wing was broken. The child cried and cried, because toys from Velkar Prime could not be repaired by anyone except Velkar master craftsmen. And the waiting list was 3 years long. An old merchant who ran a food stall nearby watched the crying child. After a long moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small toolkit. A human gave me this, he said quietly. Years ago, a young man with kind eyes. He taught me how to fix things. I never thanked him. I thought it was beneath me to learn from a human. He knelt beside the child and carefully opened the broken bird. His hands trembled, but he remembered the lessons. Within an hour, the bird was singing again. The child's mother tried to pay him. He refused. The human never charged me, he said. He said that helping was its own reward. I did not understand what he meant. I think I am beginning to understand now. The Galactic Archive, the great library that contained all knowledge in the galaxy, released a classified report. For centuries, it had been sealed, marked as irrelevant, forgotten by those in power. The report documented 17 separate incidents where human intervention had prevented galaxy-wide catastrophe. A radiation leak that could have poisoned 3 star systems. A computer virus that could have crashed every navigation system in known space. A diplomatic incident that could have started a war between the 2 most powerful species in every case. Humans had solved the problem quietly, efficiently, without asking for recognition or reward. In every case, the official records had credited other species. The Velkari, the Rithani, anyone except the primitive humans who had actually done the work. Why? Asked a young archivist who had discovered the report. Why did they let us take credit? Why did they never fight back? An older colleague, one who had worked with humans long ago, shook her head sadly. Because they did not care about credit. They cared about helping. They thought that if they were patient, if they were kind, if they proved their worth through action instead of words, we would eventually see them as equals. And we never did. No, we never did. 1 year after the silence began, a delegation of lesser species requested permission to visit Earth. These were the Moss people of Verdant 7. the crystalline singers of the deep void, the small furry creatures from Hollow Moon who had no name that other species could pronounce. They had always been treated poorly by the powerful species. They had always been kind to humans. To everyone's shock, the delegation was granted entry. They spent 3 weeks on Earth when they returned. Their eyes were red and their hearts were heavy. They would not speak of what they had seen, except to say one thing. They were ready to leave for 50 years, the eldest of the Moss people said. They knew this day would come. They prepared for it, quietly, patiently, never retaliating, never complaining. They simply built a future where they would not need us anymore. Are they happy? Asked Thrixa, desperate for any information. Are they suffering? Do they miss the galaxy? The Moss person looked at him with something that might have been pity. They are sad, she said. Not because they need you. They do not need you anymore. They are sad because they loved being part of something greater. They wanted to belong. They wanted to be seen. And you broke their hearts. Thrixa could not respond. For the first time in his long life, he had no words. That night, alone in his chambers, the proud counselor of the Velkhari did something he had not done since childhood. He recorded a personal message, addressed to Ambassador Alina Vasquez. Please, he said, his voice cracking, tell me what we must do. Tell me how to make this right. I am sorry. I am so sorry. He sent the message into the silence, expecting nothing. But somewhere, in a garden on Earth, Alina Vasquez watched the message play on her screen. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply sat in the quiet and wondered if sorry would ever be enough. The galaxy freaks out when humanity breaks off all diplomacy part. For 3 weeks, Counselor Thrixa waited for a response to his message. He did not sleep well. He did not eat well. His scales, once bright and proud, grew dull with worry. His colleagues noticed the change. Some whispered that the great Velkhari leader was losing his mind. Others wondered if perhaps he was finally gaining something he had never had before. A conscience. On the 22nd day, response arrived. It was not a speech. It was not a list of demands. It was not an angry accusation or a cold rejection. It was a question. Did you ever once ask a human how they were doing? Thrixa read the words again and again. Such a simple question. Such a small thing to ask, and he could not remember ever doing it. He thought back over to 100 years of interaction with humanity. He remembered negotiations and treaties. He remembered trade agreements and territorial disputes. He remembered laughing at their proposals and dismissing their concerns, but he could not remember a single time when he had looked at a human and asked about their day, their family, their hopes, their fears. Their lives beyond the conference room, they had always been functions to him, representatives of a species, tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. Never people. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He fell to his knees in his empty chamber and made a sound that the Velkhari had no word for. It was something between a sob and a scream. His daughter Vishra found him there an hour later. She sat beside him and held his hand, saying nothing, offering comfort in the way she had learned from watching humans during her diplomatic training. I have been a fool, Thrixa whispered. We have all been fools. Yes, Vishra agreed gently. But fools can learn. The Galactic Council held a special session. For the first time in history, all 47 member species gathered, not to discuss trade or territory or power, but to discuss a single question. How do we earn forgiveness? The debate lasted for days. Some counselors wanted to offer treasure. Others wanted to offer technology. Others wanted to offer territory, returning the poor colonies they had given to humanity and replacing them with rich worlds closer to the galactic center. But the representative of the Moss people stood and spoke, words that silenced the chamber. Still do not understand, she said sadly. Humans do not want your treasure. They do not want your technology. They do not want your planets. They wanted your respect. They wanted your friendship. They wanted to be treated as equals, not as children, not as pets, not as amusing primitives. Then what can we offer them? Demanded an exasperated counselor. Change, said the moss person. Real change. Not promises, but proof. Not words, but actions. The council voted to offer humanity full and equal membership, with a formal apology written in every language of every species. It was the first such apology in galactic history. No species had ever apologized to another. It was considered a sign of weakness, but weakness. The counselors were learning was not the same as humility. The apology was sent to Earth. The galaxy waited. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. Finally, a response arrived. 3 words. We will consider it. For a year, the galaxy waited. Some species grew impatient, angry that the humans would not simply accept their apology and return to normal. Others understood that trust, once broken, could not be repaired with a single message. During that year, things began to change. On Velkar Prime, young engineers formed study groups to learn the skills that humans had once provided for free. They named their movement the Humble Path, and they focused not on glory or prestige, but on service, on being useful, on helping without expecting reward. On Rethon, Dr. Torvash established a new medical initiative. Rethani doctors volunteered to treat the diseases and patients they had once considered beneath them. They called it the Chen Foundation, named after the human doctor whose work had been ignored for so long across the galaxy. Species began to treat each other differently. The powerful showed kindness to the weak. The ancient showed patience with the young, not because they had to, but because they had seen what happened when kindness was forgotten. Ambassador Alina Vasquez watched these changes from Earth. She received reports from the lesser species, who had become humanity's quiet allies. She saw the study groups and the foundations, and the small acts of compassion that were spreading like seeds after a long winter. Part of her wanted to believe it was real. Part of her was afraid it was just performance, just a show to bring the humans back, so everything could return to the way it was before. She walked through the gardens of the diplomatic quarter in Geneva, past the empty halls where alien delegations had once gathered. The buildings were being used for other purposes now. Schools, hospitals, research centers. Humanity had learned to thrive without the galaxy. But Alina missed it. She missed the crowded halls and the strange languages and the challenge of building bridges between species who had nothing in common except their place in the universe. Her communicator buzzed. A message from her government. The Council has waited a full year. They have not threatened us. They have not demanded our return. They have only asked if we would consider coming back. What is your recommendation? Alina thought for a long time. She thought about the laughter in the council chamber. She thought about the years of dismissal and condescension. She thought about the tired, heartbroken humans who had finally stopped hoping. But she also thought about the changes she had seen. The study groups, the foundations, the small acts of kindness that asked for nothing in return. She typed her response slowly. Carefully, we have conditions. The next day, a human ship appeared at the edge of council space for the first time in 2 years. It was small and simple. It's nothing like the grand vessels of the powerful species. Elena's voice came through every channel, calm and clear. This is Ambassador Alina Vasquez of Earth. We are prepared to discuss terms across the galaxy. Billions of beings held their breath. The silence was finally breaking. But what came next would determine whether anything had truly changed, or whether the galaxy would simply repeat its mistakes all over again. The galaxy freaks out when humanity breaks off all diplomacy. Part 5. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had been redesigned. Where once the seating had been arranged in tiers, the most powerful species at the top and the lesser species at the bottom, now every seat was on the same level. A circle of equals. At the center of the circle, where no seat had existed before, stood a new chair. It was made of dark wood from Earth, carved with symbols from every human culture, polished until it gleamed under the lights. The counselors watched in silence as Ambassador Alina Vasquez walked through the doors. She wore simple clothes, nothing like the formal robes of the other diplomats. Her hair was gray now, showing the years of stress and struggle. But her eyes were clear and calm, Beside her walked representatives from the lesser species, the moss people, the crystalline singers. The small furry creatures from Hollow Moon, they had asked to accompany her, and she had agreed. They were her friends. They had proven it when friendship had cost them something. Alina stopped at the center of the room and looked around at the faces watching her. Some were hopeful. Some were afraid. Some were ashamed. Counselor Thrixa rose from his seat. He looked older than she remembered. His scales had lost their shine, and his 4 eyes carried a weight that had not been there before. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, and his voice trembled slightly. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you back. The chair at the center is for you. It is the seat of a founder, reserved for those who shape the future of our community. We hope you will accept it." Elena did not move toward the chair. Instead, she pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the floor. A holographic display appeared, showing a simple document. "These are our conditions," she said. "They are not negotiable." The chamber was silent as the counselors read the list. Full and equal membership for humanity, with voting rights identical to all other species. This was expected, but the conditions that followed were not. What anyone had predicted, full and equal membership for all species, currently classified as developing or lesser. Immediate. Elevation to equal status with no waiting. Period. An end to hierarchical membership entirely. No more tiers. No more rankings. Every species, from the ancient Zenith to the newest starfarers, would have the same voice. Mandatory cultural exchange programs. Every species would send representatives to live among other species, not as diplomats or traders, but as neighbors. They would learn each other's languages, eat each other's food, raise their children together. A formal acknowledgement. Recorded in every archive and taught in every school, of the contributions humanity had made during their years of dismissal. Not for pride, but for truth. And finally, a promise. A promise that no species would ever again be laughed at for reaching toward something greater. A promise that kindness would be valued as highly as power. A promise that the galaxy would judge its members not by their technology or their age, but by their character. Thrixa finished reading and looked up at Alina with something like wonder. "These conditions," he said slowly, "they are not for humanity alone. They are for everyone." "Yes," Alina said simply. "We did not come back to take revenge. We did not come back to claim power. We came back because we still believe that this community can be something beautiful. But not if it stays the way it was. Not if we repeat the same mistakes." She paused and looked around the chamber. "We left because you broke our hearts. We are returning because you showed us that hearts can change. But change is not a single moment. It is a choice you make every day, in every interaction, in every small moment of kindness or cruelty. We will be watching. And if you forget again, we will leave again. And next time, we will not come back." The chamber was silent for a long moment, then Counselor Thrixa did something that no Velkar had ever done before a member of another species. He stepped down from his seat, walked to the center of the chamber, and bowed his head before Elena Vasquez. "I second every condition," he said, "and I add one more. I propose that the galaxy formally apologize, not just to humanity, but to every species we have ever dismissed. Every culture we laughed at. Every people we considered beneath us. We were wrong. We were all wrong." One by one, the other counselors rose and added their voices. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the powerful apologized to the powerless. The ancient humbled themselves before the young, and humanity took its seat at the center of the circle. The years that followed were not easy. Change never is. There were arguments and setbacks and moments when old prejudices rose to the surface. But there were also moments of unexpected beauty. A Valkyrie engineer and a human farmer started a school together, teaching children from a dozen species how to build and grow and create. They called it the Open Hand. Dr. Torvash became the first Rithani to receive full training in human medical techniques. He spent his remaining years traveling to the poorest worlds, treating patients that his own people had once ignored, the Moss people established a network of gardens across the galaxy, places where any being could come to rest and heal and remember that life was beautiful, and on a small space station near the border of human space. Two children played together in a garden. One was human, with dark hair and bright eyes. The other was Velkari, with scales that shimmered like water. The Velkari child tripped and fell, scraping her knee on the rough ground. She looked up with tears in her 4 eyes. Waiting to see what the human would do, the human child knelt beside her immediately. She pulled a small bandage from her pocket and carefully covered the wound. Then she smiled and offered her hand. "Does it hurt?" she asked. The Velkari child nodded. "That is okay," the human said. "Pain goes away. Friends stay." She helped the Velkari to her feet, and they continued playing together as if nothing had happened. Nearby, a group of adults from different species watched. They did not laugh. They did not dismiss what they saw as primitive or childish. They smiled, because finally, after all those years, they understood what humanity had been trying to show them all along. The strongest force in the universe was not technology or power or ancient wisdom. It was a simple hand, extended in kindness, asking nothing in return. And that was the day the galaxy truly began to change.